My dear people of God, our readings today from God's holy word are just filled with meaning. So, for instance, in our second reading from Paul's letter to the Romans, it speaks about how you and I are called to be co-workers of Jesus in the way we bear the crosses of our lives. He's telling us we're going to have to suffer, but the suffering of this world is nothing compared to the glory to come. And normally, I'd like to reflect on that, the role of the cross in our lives, but there are two other things this past week that I need to reflect on, that tie in with our first reading in our psalm and our gospel. In our psalm today, we prayed, "The seed that falls on good ground will yield a fruitful harvest." The seed that falls on good ground will yield a fruitful harvest. So also our first reading in our gospel talk about planting seeds. So I'd like to reflect on that psalm today. The seed that falls on good ground will yield a fruitful harvest, in terms of both our spiritual lives and also in light of the 250th anniversary of the signing of the Declaration of Independence. So last weekend at the Masses I had, and on the 4th of July itself, on the 9 o'clock Mass last Saturday, and the weekend before, I spoke of the blessings of the Declaration of Independence and how our nation was established on the principles of the gospel of Jesus Christ. I don't want to repeat that in the homily now, but you can look at those on the YouTube channel if you want. But I'd like to build on those ideas today. The teaching of Jesus, it stems all the way back to the teaching of the book of Genesis, when the Bible tells us that the human race was made very good, and that human beings are made in the image and likeness of God. And that, of course, gives every human being incredible dignity, that we're made in the image and likeness of God. When sin came into the world, we became tainted by sin. The dignity was tarnished, but the dignity was not destroyed. It was tarnished, but not destroyed. So we see throughout the Bible how God exalted the dignity of people no matter what their social standing. When God chose the people to be his own people, he didn't choose the country with the greatest economy or the most powerful army. No, he chose a nation that was slaves. A nation that was slaves. The Mosaic Law spoke about how the poor and the needy were to be treated with dignity. And so many of the prophets, while much of their focus was on how people were turning to false gods, the other big theme of the prophets, they spoke about the mistreatment of the poor, the mistreatment of laborers. So both the law and the prophets spoke of the dignity of every human person. Even the aliens in their lands who weren't part of God's people were to be treated with respect and dignity. So it wasn't just that God's chosen people had dignity. Every human person has incredible dignity. Then, of course, in the ministry of Jesus, we see how he reached out to the poor. He reached out to the marginalized. He reached out to those that society thought were unimportant. So, my friends, the whole Bible, both the Old Testament and the New Testament, were the foundation of our nation. As I understand it, Thomas Jefferson, originally in the Declaration of Independence, included a passionate passage that strongly condemned the transatlantic slave trade, and he blamed King George III for that trade. He described the slave trade as a cruel war against human nature itself, violating the most sacred rights of life and liberty. Unfortunately, some of the delegates of the Second Continental Congress objected to that. And it appeared that if that passage wasn't removed, there would be no unity among the states, and the colonies never probably would have been able to achieve their independence from Great Britain because they would have been divided. So some of the anti-slavery delegates concluded it was better to achieve independence, and then later, as a united country, they could deal with ending slavery. But the seed of liberty planted by God in the Bible did fall on good soil. It had some thorns choking it out a little, but it fell on good soil. But after a very bloody civil war, slavery was ended in our land. And liberty and freedom flourished 30 or 60 or 100-fold in our nation. It was just a matter of time before the teaching of the Bible and the principles put forth in the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution would come to fruition, and the nation more and more came to recognize the dignity of every person. My friends, the founders of our nation brought the teaching of the Bible to fruition in the founding of our country based on the dignity of the human person and the idea that we have God-given rights. Every other nation in the world at that point saw the king as supreme, and the people only had the rights the king decided they should have. But our country was founded on the idea that our rights come from God, and no nation can deny those rights. And our Constitution didn't grant the rights. Our Constitution limited the power of government. It didn't say what the people could do. It limited what the government could and could not do. And that was a revolutionary thought, bringing the teaching of the Bible into the foundation of our nation. Some try to hide the Christian foundations of our country, because if they can deceive us about the past, they can manipulate the present and the future. But also this week, the church celebrated the feast of Saint Benedict. He's considered the founder of Western monasticism. So while our nation's founders sought to bring the principles of the Bible to rule our land, Saint Benedict and the monks who followed him sought to make the principles of the Bible rule individual souls. Saint Benedict showed that with God's grace, human beings could be set free from sin. With God's grace, human beings could renounce evil. With God's grace, human beings could live in holiness. And Benedictine monasteries throughout the Middle Ages became centers of learning, centers of hospitality, even centers of commerce. Founded on the principle of the dignity of every human person and God's call to holiness, the Benedictine monasteries helped the culture grow around the gospel of Jesus Christ. So by clearing forests and draining swamps, Benedictine monks developed innovative farming, brewing, metallurgical techniques. Their self-sustaining estates drove local and regional economies. They provided a vital society safety net, offering alms to the poor, medical care in infirmaries, and safe lodging for weary pilgrims on the road. So both the founders of the United States and the monks of the Benedictine monasteries were inspired by the teaching of Jesus to enhance the dignity of every human person. And my friends, we can see how that first reading came to fruition, both in our country and in the church. The first reading talked about how God sends his word and it's going to bear fruit. It's not going to return to him without accomplishing what he wanted. My friends, if we're to bear good fruit, if we're to yield a fruitful harvest, we need to be true to the founders of our nation, but even more importantly, let's be true to the principles of Jesus who inspired our founders by working to promote the dignity of every person, including the dignity of the preborn, the dignity of foreigners, the dignity of people of every race, of every gender, of every nationality. As the Bible teaches, every person is made in the image and likeness of God. As the Declaration of Independence declares, all people are created equal and are endowed by the Creator by certain inalienable rights. My friends, that is the seed that Jesus taught. Let's strive to bear abundant fruit with that seed. Let's strive to be true to the foundation of our nation. Let's strive to be true to the teaching of Jesus Christ by recognizing the dignity of every person and striving to help others see the dignity of every person on the face of the earth, so that we as individuals and we as a country can bear fruit 30 or 60 or 100-fold. Amen.